There's one question, one single question that gets asked at traffic stops thousands of times every single day. A question so routine, so expected, so completely ordinary that most people have an answer forming in their mouth before the officer even finishes asking it. And almost everybody answers it wrong. Not wrong like they say something offensive, not wrong like they make a scene or get confrontational. Wrong in a way that is quiet and cooperative and genuinely well-intentioned and completely damaging to themselves. I want you to think back for a second. Think about the last time you were pulled over, or if it's been a while, think about someone you know who was. Picture those first 30 seconds after you pull over, the hazards blinking, hands on the wheel, that particular kind of silence while you watch the officer in your mirror getting out of their car, walking toward you. And then they get to your window, and they say it. Do you know why I stopped you today? What do you say? If you're like most people, if you're like I was for most of my driving life, you just answer it, immediately, honestly, without thinking twice. Maybe you say something like, I think I was going a little fast back there, or was it that stop sign at the last intersection? Or the one that sounds the most innocent of all. I honestly have no idea. Did I do something wrong? And right there, in that moment, with those words, you've made the first mistake. Not because you lied, not because you were hostile, because you were honest. Because your instinct was to be transparent and cooperative and easy to deal with. And that instinct, in this specific legal context, is the one nobody ever taught you to question. Let me tell you about a guy named Daniel. Daniel is one of the most careful drivers you'll ever meet, genuinely. He's the kind of person who signals in parking lots when nobody else is even around, never touches his phone, checks his mirrors more than most driving instructors would require. In 12 years of driving, he'd never had a single thing on his record. Not a warning, not a minor ticket, nothing. He got pulled over on a Wednesday evening last spring. The reason was a brake light, one bulb burned out that Daniel genuinely did not know about yet. He was home in under an hour, so it worked out okay. But here's the thing, that stop lasted 40 minutes. 40 minutes for a burned out brake light. And the reason it stretched from what should have been a 5-minute interaction into a 40-minute one had nothing to do with the light. It had everything to do with a conversation. A perfectly innocent, perfectly honest, perfectly natural conversation that Daniel walked into without realizing what he was walking into. Starting with that first question. Do you know why I stopped you today? Daniel guessed. He was wrong about what the reason actually was. He guessed something about his lane change earlier on the highway. But being wrong about the reason wasn't the problem. The problem was that in trying to be helpful, in trying to seem like a cooperative, transparent, decent person, he opened a door. And once that door opened, it didn't close easily. Here's what I want you to sit with for just a second before we go any further. That question, do you know why I stopped you, is not small talk. It is not a warm-up. It is not the officer just buying time while they figure out what they want to say next. It is a question with a purpose. And the purpose is not what most people assume it is. Most people hear that question and think, this is my chance to show I'm cooperative. This is my opportunity to demonstrate I'm a reasonable, non-threatening, law-abiding person who has absolutely nothing to hide. This is where I prove I'm one of the good ones. That instinct is completely understandable. It's a good instinct in almost every other situation in life. In a traffic stop, in the first 30 seconds of a legal encounter with law enforcement, it is the instinct that gets people into trouble more consistently than almost anything else. And here's the part that makes this genuinely frustrating. The people who answer this question the most enthusiastically, the most honestly, the most openly, are almost always the innocent ones. Think about that for a second. People who've actually done something serious are sometimes more guarded. They've thought about this. They've considered what they're going to say. They're not just reacting from instinct. Innocent people react. Innocent people answer immediately. Innocent people say exactly what comes to mind, because having nothing to hide makes openness feel like the obvious strategy. It isn't. Not here. Not for this question. Not in this specific context. So let's actually talk about what that question is. Because understanding what it's doing is what lets you respond to it properly. When an officer asks, do you know why I stopped you? They already know why they stopped you. They observed whatever they observed. They made the decision to pull you over. The reason exists in their head before they ever reach your window. So why ask? A few things are happening at once. They're assessing you. How you respond to that question tells them a lot about your demeanor, your level of anxiety, whether you're calm or agitated, how you handle unexpected pressure. All of that is being noted while you're mid-answer. And then there's the legal layer. If you volunteer an admission, if you say, I was probably going a bit fast, or I think I rolled through that last stop sign, that is a statement, a voluntary, spontaneous statement offered before you were asked specifically about any of it, before you even knew what the stop was for. Voluntary statements have particular legal weight because they come from you unprompted. You weren't formally questioned, you just offered it. And that changes things. Most people don't know this. They're not thinking about any of this. They're just answering a question the way they'd answer any question from any person, with honesty and directness, because that's how decent people communicate. The problem is that a traffic stop is not just a conversation between two people. It's a legal encounter. And legal encounters have different rules than regular conversations. Nobody teaches us that. And then one day we're sitting on the side of the road making decisions we don't even realize are decisions. The first question is just the beginning, and what comes after that question is in some ways more important. Because by the time you're past the opening, your guard has come down. The adrenaline spike has passed. The officer has been friendly and professional, and the whole thing has found a normal rhythm. And right there, in that relaxed, settled, almost comfortable middle stretch of the stop, is when the questions that actually do the most work start coming. So where are you headed tonight? Coming from work or just out? You live around this area? Long day? These feel like small talk. They feel like an officer who's just personable and not in a rush. And sometimes they genuinely are exactly that. Just a person being decent while they do their juzz. Now, before we go any further, I want to say something clearly, and I mean it genuinely. This isn't a video about being afraid of police. It isn't about treating every officer like an adversary. The overwhelming majority of traffic stops are handled professionally by officers who are just doing their jobs. That's the reality, and I don't want to distort it. This is about something else. This is about the gap between what you're legally required to do during a traffic stop and what your instincts tell you to do. Because that gap is real, it's significant, and nobody ever sits us down and explains it. So let's close it. What are you actually legally required to do when you're pulled over? Most people have a vague sense of this, and vague senses under pressure produce bad decisions. So let's be specific. You're required to pull over when signaled. You're required to provide your driver's license, your vehicle registration, and your proof of insurance when those are requested. In states with stop and identify laws, you may need to give your name if you're lawfully detained. And you're required not to physically obstruct the officer. That is genuinely the list. You are not required to explain where you're going, not required to account for where you came from, not required to describe what you were doing earlier, not required to tell them who was in your car last week, not required to explain what's in your back seat, not required to guess why you were stopped. All of those things feel required. The situation, the authority present, the social pressure, it all creates this overwhelming sense that you must answer everything, explain everything, make yourself completely transparent to make this go smoothly. But feeling required and being required are two different things. And most people, in those moments, respond to the feeling without ever realizing they had a choice. Back to that first question. Here's the answer that is honest, polite, legally neutral, and genuinely protective. No, officer, I'm not sure. That's it. Not a guess, not an apology, not an explanation of where you were going or what you were thinking or whether you noticed the speed limit sign. Just, no, I'm not sure. It's truthful. Even if you have a suspicion about why you were stopped, you genuinely don't know for certain. It's polite, and it contains zero admissions, zero suggested violations, zero volunteered information about anything. I know it sounds almost too short, like you should say more, like that brevity is going to seem weird or cold or suspicious. It isn't. The discomfort of that brevity, the feeling that you need to fill it with something, is exactly the mechanism that produces the longer, more complicated, more damaging answers. Learning to sit with that brief, slightly awkward pause is one of the most practically useful things any driver can develop. Job. But sometimes they're building a timeline, establishing reference points, creating a picture of your evening that will be compared against other information. You said you were coming from a friend's place on the east side becomes something to set other information against. And the thing is, you can't know which one you're in. From your side of the window, you don't have enough information to make that judgment. So the question becomes, why would you volunteer a detailed account of your evening when you don't have to? When giving that account is a choice, not a requirement, most people never ask themselves that question. They just answer because it feels normal to answer. Here's the trap that catches people who already know about the first question. Maybe they've seen a video like this before. Maybe they've thought about this a little. They've heard the advice, be careful with that opening question, don't guess, don't suggest violations. So they're ready for the first question. They answer it carefully, and then they relax because they feel like they handled the hard part. But the harder questions aren't the ones at the beginning. The harder ones come in the middle, when you're comfortable, when the energy has settled, when the conversation feels genuinely human and normal. That transition from formal to casual, that's where a lot of the most significant moments in a traffic stop actually happen. Because our guards come down during casual conversation. We're wired to reciprocate warmth with openness. When someone is being genuinely pleasant to us, shutting that down feels actively unfriendly. But here's the thing, saying, I'd rather keep that to myself, isn't unfriendly if you say it the right way. It's just honest. It's just someone who knows what they're required to share and what they're not. Now, the consent question. This one deserves real attention because it comes in so many forms that people often don't recognize it as the same ask. Direct version. Mind if I take a look around real quick? Assumptive version. I'm just going to check the trunk, not asked as a question, stated as a plan, delivered with enough casual confidence that many people just step aside, because it sounded like it was already decided. Sympathy version. Look, if there's nothing back there, this literally takes 2 minutes and you're on your way. You'd actually be helping yourself. Guilt version. You've got nothing to hide, so this shouldn't be a problem, right? That last one is doing something really specific. It's taking your right to decline a search and reframing it as suspicious behavior. If you're innocent, the logic goes, you wouldn't mind. Minding is suspicious. But think about that honestly for a second. The right to decline a search exists for everyone, not just for people who have something to hide. It's a constitutional protection that applies regardless of what's in your car. Using it, calmly, clearly, isn't suspicious behavior. It's informed behavior. The response to every version of this question is the same. Officer, I don't consent to searches. Not, I'd rather you didn't. Not, I mean, I'd prefer not, but not, you can check the back seat, but not the glove box. All of those are either ambiguous or they establish a partial consent that becomes very complicated. 5 words. Calm, clear. That's it. Now let's get to the actual phrases. Because understanding all of this is one thing. Having the words ready when your hands are shaking a little and there's someone in uniform standing outside your window is a completely different skill. And it is a skill. It's something you build by practicing before you need it. From the moment the lights appear, pull over safely, hazards on. Once stopped, park, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, visible, still. Nighttime, interior light on. That one thing removes visual uncertainty for the officer before a single word is said, and that benefits you directly. Do not reach for anything. Wait. When the first question comes, no, officer, I'm not sure. 4 words. Truthful, neutral, nothing added. The urge to say more, to seem friendlier, more cooperative, more like someone with absolutely nothing to hide, resist it. That urge has produced more damaging statements than almost anything else in traffic stops. The brevity of your answer is not rudeness, it's clarity. When asked for documents, provide them without hesitation. This is your legal requirement, and you fulfill it promptly and clearly. If anything is in the glove box, narrate before moving. My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it now. Then move slowly and deliberately. Return your hands to a visible, neutral position when done. When questions shift to your activities, where you're going, where you came from, who you were with. I'd rather not answer questions about my activities without speaking to an attorney first. Say it once, politely, and then stop explaining your choice. The explanation you add, trying to soften the phrase, almost always does more damage than the phrase itself. When the consent question comes in any form, officer, I don't consent to searches. If they indicate a search is happening regardless, do not physically resist. Do not raise your voice. Do not attempt to block anything. I want to be clear that I'm not consenting to this search, but I won't physically resist. That creates a clean record. You didn't consent. You didn't obstruct. What happens legally from that point is determined through proper process, with an attorney, not on the side of the road. When the stop seems to be extending past its natural conclusion, documents returned, ticket or warning dealt with, but the conversation continuing. Am I free to go, officer? Politely, genuinely, like someone who has somewhere to be. If yes, thank you, officer, and leave. Promptly, no follow-up questions. If no, I understand. I'm going to remain silent until I can speak with an attorney. And then mean it. Stop talking. The full list. Say these out loud right now. Say them until they're boring. The day they're boring is the day you're ready. No, officer, I'm not sure. My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it now. I'd rather not answer questions about my activities without an attorney. Officer, I don't consent to searches. I'm not consenting to this search, but I won't physically resist. Am I free to go, officer? I'm going to remain silent until I can speak with an attorney. 7 phrases. That is genuinely the whole kit. You don't need a law degree. You just need those 7 phrases practiced until they come out calm and natural, even when your body is doing something nervous. Now let's run this through some real situations. Because the standard pullover is one thing, real life doesn't always give you the standard version. What if you're a passenger and not the driver? Most people assume the stop has nothing to do with them if they're not behind the wheel. That assumption is incomplete. Courts have established that passengers are considered part of the stop. You can be ordered out of the vehicle. In certain states, you may need to provide your name if lawfully detained. And if a search happens, what's near you and what belongs to you is relevant. The specific mistake passengers make constantly is trying to help. They narrate on behalf of the driver. "We were just at dinner, this is totally fine. He hasn't had anything to drink. I was with him the whole time." None of that was asked for. All of it adds threads to the interaction that weren't there before. Same principles. Hands visible, calm, quiet where not legally required to speak. What if they asked to see your phone? The Supreme Court ruled on this unanimously, a genuinely rare thing. Police generally need a warrant to go through the contents of your cell phone. Your phone isn't just an object. It's your communications, your location history, your financial information, your photographs. The court recognized that, and the protection is strong. "I don't consent to a search of my phone." Clear. Firm. If they insist they have authority, "I want it noted that I'm not consenting to this," and let the legal process take it from there. That process exists for exactly this reason. What if it's late, the area feels isolated, and the situation feels uncomfortable for reasons that have nothing to do with what the officer is doing? This is a real concern that deserves a direct, practical answer. Turn hazards on immediately. Slow down visibly to show you've acknowledged the stop. You can drive at a clearly reduced speed to the nearest well-lit populated area, a gas station, a store, somewhere visible. If you do this, call 911 while driving. "I've been pulled over and I'm driving to a lit area for safety before stopping." A legitimate officer will understand this completely. Many are aware the concern exists. The key is that you're communicating your intention, not evading. That distinction matters. What if the situation escalates unexpectedly? What if the energy shifts in a way you didn't anticipate? Say this plainly. Your physical safety is the only priority in that moment, not making a legal point, not asserting a right loudly, not winning the exchange. Safety first, without exception. De-escalate through your own behavior. Lower your voice. Slow every movement. Narrate what you're doing. Keep hands visible. Be the calmest person in that car, not as a tactic, but because it genuinely reduces the chance of something bad happening. If something went wrong legally, comply in the moment and document everything the second you're somewhere safe. Times, what was said, the sequence of events, every detail while it's still clear in your head. That information, in the hands of the right attorney, has real power. The roadside is not the arena for that fight. Court is. What if you already answered the first question wrong? What if you guessed before any of this information was in your head? Here's the honest answer. That has happened to almost everyone. And in the vast majority of stops, it doesn't produce serious consequences. One imperfect answer to one question doesn't automatically create a serious problem. But going forward, now you know. And knowing means the next time those lights appear in your mirror, you don't have to react on instinct alone. You have something better than instinct. You have a prepared response. And a prepared response, delivered calmly, is worth more in that moment than any amount of after-the-fact regret about what you wish you'd said. Let's bring this home. Here's the thing that I keep coming back to with all of this. It isn't complicated. The actual legal knowledge required to protect yourself during a routine traffic stop is not extensive. It doesn't require years of study. It doesn't require understanding case law or constitutional nuance. It requires knowing a few things that nobody teaches you. What you're actually required to do, what you're not required to do, the specific moments where innocent people accidentally give things away, and the exact words that protect you without creating conflict. That's it. That's the whole gap. And the gap only exists because nobody ever closed it for most of us. The drivers who handle these encounters well, who walk away without complications, without problems, without a statement that follows them, they're not lawyers. They're not special. They're not equipped with anything extraordinary. They just knew what to say before they needed to say it. Which brings me to the thing I want you to actually do after this video. Before you drive anywhere tonight, before you get back in your car tomorrow morning, practice those 7 phrases out loud. Right now if you want. Seriously, nobody is watching. Say them like you mean them. Say them in a calm, neutral voice that doesn't sound defensive or hostile or memorized. Say them until they feel natural in your mouth. Because here's the version of you that I want to exist. The version that gets pulled over 6 months from now on a Wednesday evening. The adrenaline hits, the window comes down, the officer walks up, and when that first question lands, "Do you know why I stopped you today?" The answer comes out immediately, calmly, without hesitation, without a guess, without a suggested violation, without a biographical summary of the last 2 hours. "No, officer, I'm not sure." 4 words. And then silence that you're completely comfortable sitting in. That version of you exists. It just takes 5 minutes of practice to get there. Now, there's something I didn't cover in this video that honestly might be more important than anything we talked about today. We spent this whole time talking about what happens once those lights are already in your mirror, once the stop is already started. But what about what happens before that? What happens when an officer approaches you on foot? Not during a traffic stop, but on a sidewalk, in a parking lot, outside a building. The rules are different. The moment is different. And the question that usually starts those encounters, it's not the same question. It's actually more confusing. And innocent people fail it even more consistently than the one we talked about today. That's what we're covering next.